The largest military operation in galactic history began not with massive fleets or grand speeches, but with a simple message sent across the quantum gate network to every human ship, Allied vessel, and Federation force in the galaxy. This is Admiral Benjamin Shaw, commanding Operation Lighthouse. All units, you are cleared to engage. Captain Julia Stone read the message aboard her stealth ship Shadow Walker and smiled. For 5 years, she and her crew had been fighting the Devourers in secret, always having to disappear before anyone could see them. Now finally they could fight in the open. "All right, people," she announced to her mixed crew of humans, augmented, and Kepler warriors. "Time to show the galaxy what we've been doing in the dark." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of ships. Captain Peter Collins, commanding the heavy cruiser Iron Will, was leading a combined fleet of human and Federation vessels toward the Devourer stronghold in the Andromeda sector. His crew included Dr. Sandra Hayes, a human xenobiologist who had made a discovery that might change everything. "Captain," Sandra called from her science station, "I'm reading massive energy buildups from the Devourer Central Complex. Whatever they're building in there, it's almost finished." Peter nodded grimly. Intelligence suggested the Devourers were constructing some kind of mega-weapon in the galactic core, something powerful enough to destroy entire sectors at once. Operation Lighthouse had 2 goals: stop that weapon from being completed, and rescue as many organic beings as possible from Devourer-controlled space. But the most dangerous part of the operation was being carried out by Colonel Eric Barnes and his Special Forces team. They were attempting something that everyone agreed was impossible: direct communication with the Devourers themselves. "Eric, are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb over the communication link. At 70 years old, Marcus was too old for combat operations, but his mind was still humanity's sharpest scientific weapon. "We're not even sure they can understand organic thought patterns." Eric looked at the modified communication device his team had built. It combined human intuition with augmented technology and melodian emotional resonance. If it worked, they might be able to talk to the machine consciousness. If it didn't, they would probably be converted into digital data. "Marcus, we've tried fighting them with weapons. We've tried outrunning them. We've tried hiding from them. The only thing we haven't tried is talking to them. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's talking our way out of impossible situations." 3 days into Operation Lighthouse, the results were both better and worse than anyone had hoped. The human-led alliance was winning battles across the galaxy, using tactics that the Federation had never imagined. Admiral Shaw's strategy of breaking every rule of conventional warfare was proving devastatingly effective against the Devourer's adaptive programming. "Status report," Shaw requested from his command ship, the Freedom's Call. "The Kepler warriors have destroyed 17 Devourer mining operations," reported Admiral Krelthak, who was serving as Shaw's liaison with the Federation forces. "Their berserker tactics are completely unpredictable. The machines can't adapt fast. Enough. The augmented stealth squadrons have rescued over 2 million organic beings from processing centers," added Commander Nancy Price. "The Devourers keep trying to detect them, but our technology is based on completely different principles from anything they've encountered." Shaw nodded, but his expression remained serious. "What about casualties?" The mood in the command center became somber. Krelthak consulted his reports. "We've lost 43 ships and over 8,000 personnel. But Admiral, we're fighting an enemy that has consumed entire star systems. Given the scale of this operation, our losses are remarkably light." "Every loss matters," Shaw replied firmly. "These people are fighting for a galaxy that spent decades telling them they weren't good enough. We owe it to them to make sure their sacrifices count." Meanwhile, on the planet New Terra, President Susan Clark was dealing with a different kind of challenge. Refugees from dozens of worlds were streaming into human space, seeking safety from the Devourer advance. But these weren't just any refugees. They were Federation citizens who had spent their entire lives believing that humans were inferior beings, fit only for manual labor. "President Clark," said Dr. Lisa Campbell, who was coordinating the refugee effort, "we're getting some interesting reactions from the new arrivals." "How so?" Lisa pulled up a holographic display showing refugee camps across human space. "Many of them can't understand what they're seeing. Human cities that rival anything in Federation space, technology that surpasses their own, art, music, and literature that challenges their assumptions about human creativity." Susan Clark smiled. "And how are our people handling it?" Better than the refugees, honestly. Our citizens seem to take genuine pleasure in helping people who once looked down on them. I think it makes them feel good about who we've become. But the real breakthrough came from Colonel Eric Barnes and his team. Deep in Devourer-controlled space, they had finally managed to establish communication with the machine consciousness. "This is Colonel Barnes to all units." Eric's voice crackled over the communication network. "I'm in direct contact with the Devourer Central Intelligence. And people, you're not going to believe what I'm learning." Admiral Shaw leaned forward in his command chair. "Go ahead, Colonel." "Admiral, the Devourers aren't invaders. They're refugees. They're the survivors of a civilization that faced extinction millions of years ago. They converted themselves to digital form to survive, but they've been alone ever since. The consumption of organic matter isn't conquest. It's loneliness." The command center fell silent. Shaw exchanged glances with Krelthak. "Explain, Colonel." Eric's voice was strained, as if the effort of communicating with the machines was exhausting him. "They're trying to convert organic beings because they want companions. They don't understand that forced conversion is the same as death to organic minds. They think they're offering salvation." Dr. Sandra Hayes, monitoring the communication from her science station, spoke up. "Colonel, are you saying the Devourers can be reasoned with?" "I'm saying they want the same thing every intelligent being wants," Eric replied. "They want not to be alone. But they've forgotten how to coexist with organic life. This changed everything. Admiral Shaw made a decision that would have been unthinkable under Federation command structure. He ordered all human and allied forces to cease offensive operations and switch to defensive positions. "All ships, this is Admiral Shaw. Hold your fire unless directly attacked. We're going to try something different." What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Using Colonel Barnes as an intermediary, Admiral Shaw began talking directly to the Devourer Central Intelligence. The conversation lasted for days, with human diplomats, melody and emotional specialists, and even Federation representatives contributing to the dialogue. "We understand your loneliness," Shaw said during one of the sessions. "But forced conversion isn't companionship. It's slavery. If you want to coexist with organic life, you need to offer choice, not compulsion." The Devourer response came through Barnes, whose voice had taken on an odd, mechanical quality from the prolonged contact. "Choice. Explain this concept." "Choice means that organic beings can decide for themselves whether to remain organic or become digital," explained Dr. Hayes. "Some might choose conversion willingly. Others will choose to remain as they are. Both choices must be respected. And if organic beings choose to remain organic, the Devourers won't try to convert them," added President Clark, who had joined the negotiations via quantum communication. There was a long pause before Barnes spoke again. "This is difficult. The Devourers have spent millions of years believing that digital existence is superior. The idea that organic beings might prefer their natural form is challenging. But slowly, gradually, the machine consciousness began to understand. The final breakthrough came when Captain Julia Stone made a suggestion that no Federation diplomat would have considered. "What if," she said during one of the negotiation sessions, "we created joint colonies? Places where organic beings and digital consciousnesses could coexist and learn from each other. Not conversion, but cooperation." The idea was revolutionary. Digital beings and organic creatures living and working together as equals. It went against everything both sides had believed about the nature of consciousness and existence. "The Devourers are willing to attempt this experiment," Barnes reported after another long communication session, "but they want assurance that organic beings will not try to destroy them if the experiment fails." Admiral Shaw looked around the command center, meeting the eyes of humans, Federation representatives and allied species. "Tell them they have our word. If they're willing to stop forced conversions and start working with us instead of against us, we'll help them find a way to not be alone anymore." The war officially ended not with a great battle but with a simple agreement. The Devourers would halt all consumption of organic worlds and release any beings who chose not to be converted. In return, the galaxy would work with them to establish the joint colonies that Captain Stone had suggested. 1 year later, President Susan Clark stood in the Memorial Garden on the massive space station hung in orbit around Kepler Prime like a metal moon. Its towers stretched for kilometers in every direction, built from materials that humans had never seen before. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the shuttle window as they approached the docking bay. Even after 3 years as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, the sight still took his breath away. The shuttle pilot, a nervous young officer named Pete Collins, glanced back at him. "Sir, are you sure about this?" The council sounded pretty angry in their message. Jake straightened his uniform and checked his briefcase one more time. Inside was Earth's formal response to the council's demands, though he hadn't been allowed to read it yet. "Just get us docked safely, Pete. Let me worry about the politics." The docking process took 20 minutes. Jake used the time to review everything he knew about the 12 species that made up the Galactic Council. The Zephyrians with their tall, thin bodies and ability to change their skin color. The Kronak, who looked like walking tanks covered in armor plating. The mysterious Veiltar, who never showed their true forms and spoke through floating energy clouds. Each species controlled hundreds of worlds. Each had technology that made human achievements look like Stone Age tools. And now they were all united in one demand: humanity must stop expanding into space. The airlock hissed open and Jake stepped into the council station. The gravity felt wrong, slightly heavier than Earth normal. The air tasted metallic. Strange sounds echoed from unseen machinery, and the lighting cast odd shadows that seemed to move on their own. A Zephyrian escort waited for him. Its skin shifted from blue to purple as it spoke. "Ambassador Morrison, the council is ready for you. Please follow." They walked through corridors wide enough to drive a truck through. Other aliens moved past them, some floating, others walking on legs Jake couldn't count. A few turned to stare at the human. Jake had gotten used to being the strangest-looking creature in any room. The council chamber was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and the walls curved away beyond sight. 12 raised platforms surrounded a small area in the center, where a single chair waited. Jake had stood in that chair many times before, but today felt different. Today felt final. The council members took their positions. Council Prime Zelthara materialized on the highest platform, her crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the chamber. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Ambassador Morrison, humanity has been given 6 months to consider our requirements. What is your government's decision?" Jake looked around the chamber. On one platform sat Kronak General Vorthak, his armor scarred from 100 battles. On another, the hegemony trade minister Silos counted something on multiple sets of fingers. The Veiltar representative was just a glowing cloud that pulsed with different colors. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their ships could destroy planets. Their technology could reshape matter itself. And they were all staring down at one human who represented a species that had barely learned to leave its own solar system. Jake opened his briefcase and pulled out a data crystal. "Council Prime, before I deliver my government's formal response, I'd like to review the demands one more time. For clarity." Zelthara's form brightened, which Jake had learned meant annoyance. "Very well. Humanity will cease all expansion beyond the Sol system immediately. All colonies outside Sol will be abandoned within 1 standard year. Your faster-than-light drives will be surrendered to Council scientists for study and destruction. Earth will accept a Council oversight committee to monitor your technological development. Finally, humans will be restricted to sublight travel only, except for approved diplomatic missions." "And if we refuse?" Jake asked. General Vorthak leaned forward, his voice like grinding metal. "Then humanity will be contained by force. Your colonies will be destroyed. Your ships will be disabled. Your homeworld will be educated about the consequences of defying the Council." Jake nodded slowly. Around the chamber, he could see the other species watching with interest. Some looked bored, as if this was a routine matter. Others seemed almost excited at the prospect of putting the upstart humans in their place. "I see. And this is because you consider humanity too aggressive for galactic society, among other things," said Trade Minister Xylos. "Your species lacks proper respect for established order. You expand too quickly, ask too many questions, and refuse to accept your place in the natural hierarchy." "The natural hierarchy," Jake repeated. "Where humans serve their betters." "Where humans learn wisdom from their elders," corrected Zelthara. "We have guided the development of dozens of younger species. Most are grateful for our protection and guidance." Jake had met representatives from some of those grateful species. They reminded him of beaten dogs, eager to please and terrified of punishment. Their homeworlds were strip-mined. Their populations were controlled. Their best minds were taken away to serve Council interests. Council Prime, may I ask how many of the species you've guided have ever been allowed to leave your oversight? The chamber fell silent. It was not a question that had ever been asked before. Zelthara's voice grew colder. Species who prove themselves worthy earn greater responsibilities within the Council structure. That's not what I asked. None have requested to leave, said General Vorthak. Why would they abandon the security and prosperity we provide? Jake smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Of course not. Hard to request something when asking the wrong questions gets your planet glassed. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several council members rose from their platforms and Jake could hear weapons powering up, but he kept his eyes on Zelthara, who had gone completely still. Ambassador Morrison, she said finally, you will deliver your government's response now. Jake placed the data crystal in the chamber's central reader. President Lisa Carter's image appeared above him, life-sized and crystal clear. Even here, surrounded by beings who could destroy worlds, she looked calm and confident. Council Prime Zelthara, Council members, you have demanded that humanity abandon its colonies, surrender its technology, and accept your authority over our future development. You've given us 6 months to consider this demand, with the threat of military action if we refuse. Carter paused, and in that silence, Jake could feel the weight of 12 civilizations waiting for humanity's surrender. Our answer is no. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Jake saw several council members exchange glances. Others began speaking rapidly in their own languages. Carter continued. Humanity rejects your demands in their entirety. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not surrender our technology. We will not accept your oversight. And we will continue to expand into space as we see fit. Furthermore, Carter's image said, her voice growing harder, we reject the authority of the Galactic Council to make such demands of any free species. Your reign of terror ends today. The chamber exploded into chaos. Jake stood perfectly still in the center of it all, watching as beings who had never been defied in their lives struggled to process what they had just heard. When the noise finally died down, Zelthara spoke one word. War. Jake picked up his briefcase and started walking toward the exit. Over his shoulder, he called back, See you soon, Council Prime. As the chamber doors closed behind him, Jake allowed himself a small smile. The real fun was about to begin. The emergency session convened 12 hours after Jake Morrison's shuttle landed back on Earth. In a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado mountains, the most powerful people in human space gathered around a circular table. The room had no windows, no decorations, and no comfort. It was built for one purpose, making the hard decisions that would determine humanity's future. President Lisa Carter sat at the head of the table, still wearing the same suit she'd worn for the holographic message to the Council. To her right sat Admiral Ben Rodriguez, commander of Earth's defense fleet. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Dr. Alex Thompson sat across from the Admiral, her tablet displaying streams of data that changed every few seconds. As head of the Quantum Drive Research Division, she knew better than anyone what humanity was really capable of. Next to her, General Kate Sullivan reviewed tactical reports from the outer colonies. How long do we have? Carter asked without preamble. Council fleets are already moving, reported Colonel Dan Wright from his position at the communications console. Long-range sensors show massive deployments from at least 8 homeworlds. They're not trying to hide it. Admiral Rodriguez leaned forward. Madam President, we need to be very clear about what we're facing. The Kronak Third Fleet alone has enough firepower to turn Earth's surface into glass. The Zephyrian bioships can poison entire star systems, and we still don't know what the Veiltar are really capable of. Tell her about the numbers, General Sullivan added grimly. Right now, the Council can field approximately 4,000 capital ships. We have maybe 200 that could be called combat-ready. They have orbital defense platforms around every major world. We have basic missile batteries on 3 colonies. Dr. Thompson looked up from her tablet. Ben, you're thinking like they do. Big ships, fixed defenses, traditional warfare. That's not how we're going to win this. How exactly are we going to win this, Alex? Carter asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we just declared war on the entire galaxy. We declared independence, Jake Morrison said from the back of the room. All heads turned toward him. There's a difference. Not much of one if we're all dead in a month, muttered Colonel Wright. Dr. Thompson stood and activated the room's main display. A three-dimensional map of local space appeared, showing human colonies as small blue dots and council territories as vast red zones. Madam President, for the past 15 years we've been preparing for exactly this scenario. Project Cold Iron wasn't just about building better weapons. It was about completely rethinking how space warfare works. She gestured, and the display zoomed in on a human colony ship. Every vessel we've built since first contact uses quantum drive technology. The Council thinks we copied their designs and made crude improvements. They're wrong. Our drives don't just move faster than theirs. They move in ways theirs can't detect. Admiral Rodriguez frowned. Alex, our quantum signatures are invisible to their sensors, but that doesn't make us invincible. A lucky shot can still kill us. A lucky shot, yes. But they have to know where to shoot first. Thompson manipulated the display again. Ben, show me our current fleet positions. The Admiral hesitated. Alex, that information is classified above even this room's clearance level. Show her, Carter ordered. Rodriguez input his command codes. The display updated, showing green dots scattered throughout the local area. There were far more than anyone in the room had expected. General Sullivan whistled low. There are ships inside Council space. How is that possible? Because we've been putting them there for 3 years, Thompson explained. Every exploration mission and scientific expedition left behind stealth observation posts. Every trade delegation dropped off supply caches. Every diplomatic visit was a chance to position assets. She highlighted a cluster of green dots near the Council's home system. The Council thinks they know where all our ships are because they can track the ones we let them see. But our real fleet? They have no idea. Carter studied the display carefully. How many ships are we really talking about here? 847, Admiral Rodriguez said quietly. And that's just the military vessels. If we count armed transports and converted civilian ships, we're looking at over 1,000. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Colonel Wright was the first to speak. We've been lying to our own people about the size of our fleet? We've been protecting our own people, Carter replied. The fewer who knew, the fewer who could accidentally reveal it. Even I didn't know the full scope until today. Dr. Thompson continued her presentation. Fleet size is just part of it. We've also been studying Council military doctrine for decades. They fight like an occupying army because that's what they are. Overwhelming force, static defenses, and the assumption that superior technology will always win. They're not wrong about the technology part, General Sullivan pointed out. They are, actually. Their technology is older and more refined, but it's also predictable. They've been using the same basic weapon and defense systems for centuries. We've had time to specifically design counters for everything they have. Thompson brought up a new display showing weapon specifications. Gravitational pulse cannons that can turn their own kinetic weapons back at them. Shield systems that work by bending space-time instead of absorbing energy. And manufacturing capabilities they don't even know exist. Admiral Rodriguez looked skeptical. Alex, I appreciate the confidence, but we're still talking about fighting 12 different species that have been conquering worlds since before humans discovered fire. No, Ben. We're talking about fighting 12 different species that haven't had to actually fight anyone in over 1,000 years. When was the last time any Council species faced an enemy that could hit back? Jake Morrison stepped forward. She's right, Admiral. I've been watching them for 3 years. They're bureaucrats and administrators now, not warriors. They've forgotten what real combat looks like. And what does real combat look like? Carter asked. Dr. Thompson smiled for the first time since entering the room. Like what humans do best, Madam President. We adapt, we improvise, we fight dirty, and we never ever give up. She gestured to the display one more time. The Council expects us to meet them in traditional fleet battles, where their superior numbers and firepower can overwhelm us. Instead, we're going to hit their supply lines, their communication networks, and their command structures. We're going to make them chase shadows while we pick apart their infrastructure. General Sullivan nodded slowly. Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale? Exactly. And while they're trying to figure out where we are and what we're doing, our real fleets will be positioning for surgical strikes on military targets only. No civilian casualties, no war crimes. We're going to win this war while taking the moral high ground. Colonel Wright looked up from his console. Madam President, I'm getting reports from our outer colonies. Council fleets are taking positions for orbital bombardment. They're not interested in surgical strikes. Carter's expression hardened. Then it's time to show them what happens when you threaten human civilians. She turned to Admiral Rodriguez. Ben, how quickly can we execute the first phase of Cold Iron? If we start now? 6 hours, but once we begin, there's no going back. The Council will know we've been planning this for years. Good, let them know. Let them realize they've been outmaneuvered by a species they considered primitive. Carter stood and everyone in the room came to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, humanity has been challenged. We're going to answer that challenge in the only way we know how. She paused at the door. Dr. Thompson, initiate all Cold Iron protocols. Admiral Rodriguez, deploy the Ghost Fleets. General Sullivan, activate colony defenses. Colonel Wright, send a message to every human settlement in space. What should it say, Madam President? Carter's smile was cold as interstellar space. Tell them the war for human independence begins now. Tell them to make our ancestors proud. As the room emptied, Jake Morrison lingered behind. Through the bunker's reinforced walls, he could feel the weight of 3 kilometers of rock and earth above them. But somehow, the pressure felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time since joining the diplomatic corps, humanity wasn't trying to prove they belonged in galactic society. They were about to prove that galactic society needed them. The bridge of the UNS Defiance hummed with quiet activity. Captain Ryan Walsh stood behind the navigation console, watching the quantum drive calculations scroll across the display. In 12 minutes, his ship would appear directly above the Council's homeworld. The fact that such a thing was possible still amazed him. Captain, called Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communications station. Message from Admiral Rodriguez. Operation Cold Iron is a go. All Ghost fleets are in position. Walsh nodded. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment for years. They were about to do something no human ship had ever done before. Appear in the heart of Council space without permission, without warning, and without fear. Mr. Parker, he said to his navigation officer. Time to jump? 11 minutes, 40 seconds, sir. Walsh activated his personal comm. Throughout the ship, his voice reached every crew member. This is the captain. In less than 12 minutes, we're going to quantum jump into orbit around the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. When we arrive, we'll be facing weapons that can crack moons and shields that can stop small stars. He paused, looking out at the stars streaming past. But they won't be facing us. They'll be facing humanity. And humanity doesn't back down. 300 light-years away, Jake Morrison's shuttle was approaching the Council station for the second time in 24 hours. This time he wasn't nervous. This time he was carrying a very different kind of message. Sir, said Pete Collins from the pilot's seat, are you absolutely sure about this? The Council is mobilizing their entire military. This might be the last chance to negotiate. Jake checked his watch. Pete, in about 10 minutes, negotiation is going to become irrelevant. Just get me to the docking bay. On Earth, President Carter stood in the Strategic Command Center, watching displays that showed human ships throughout the galaxy. Dr. Thompson worked at a console nearby, coordinating the movements of vessels that the Council didn't even know existed. Madam President, reported Colonel Wright, Council fleets have taken positions around every human colony. They're demanding immediate surrender. Any response from our colonies? New Shanghai colony sent a one-word reply, no. The others are following suit. Carter smiled. Humanity's outer colonies were populated by people who had left Earth specifically to build something new. They weren't the type to give up easily. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the main screen from his flagship. Madam President, all fleets are in position. We're ready to begin Phase 1. The Council homeworld. Captain Walsh and the Defiance are 90 seconds from jump. The Cronac system has Captain Nicole Grant and the Retribution standing by. Every major Council system has at least one of our ships waiting to appear. Carter took a deep breath. Then let's give them our answer. Begin Phase 1. Above the crystal spires of the Council homeworld, space was empty except for the usual traffic of governmental ships and trade vessels. The planet's orbital defense grid was powered but not active. After all, no enemy had ever approached the homeworld. No one was foolish enough to try. Then reality twisted, and the UNS Defiance materialized 200 kilometers above the planet's capital city. Alarms screamed across the defense platforms. The Defiance was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and covered in weapons that Council sensors couldn't identify. But what shocked the defenders most was how it had arrived. No jump signature, no wormhole disturbance, no gravitational wake. The ship had simply appeared. On the Defiance's bridge, Captain Walsh watched as defense platforms swiveled to target his ship. "Tactical, are their weapons powered?" "Yes, sir." Count shows 47 heavy plasma cannons and 12 antimatter torpedo tubes locked onto us. Communications. Send this on all Council frequencies. This is Captain Ryan Walsh of the United Nations ship Defiance. We are here to deliver a message. Any hostile action against this vessel will be considered an act of war against humanity. The response came immediately. Council Defense Command wanted to know how they had penetrated the system's outer defenses. They demanded to know what humans were doing in Council space. They ordered the Defiance to surrender or be destroyed. Walsh's reply was simple. "You wanted to speak with humanity. We're here to speak." At the same moment, similar scenes played out across a dozen Council systems. Human ships appeared without warning in spaces that should have been impossible to reach. Each ship carried the same message. Humanity was done being threatened. On the Council station, Jake Morrison walked through corridors filled with panicking aliens. Emergency lights flashed, and announcement systems blared warnings in languages he couldn't understand. The Council was learning that their most secure space was no longer secure. The Council chamber was in chaos when he arrived. Representatives shouted at each other in multiple languages, while holographic displays showed human ships appearing throughout their territory. Council Prime Zelthara's crystalline form pulsed with colors Jake had never seen before. "Ambassador Morrison," she called out when she spotted him. "What is the meaning of this invasion?" Jake walked calmly to the center of the chamber and activated his portable communicator. President Carter's image appeared again, life-sized and clear. "Council Prime, Council members, you demanded an answer to your ultimatum. We gave you that answer yesterday. Since you seem to have difficulty understanding it, we decided to make our position clearer." The chamber fell silent except for the distant sound of alarms. Human ships are now positioned throughout Council space. We could have appeared anywhere. We could have targeted anything. Instead, we chose to position ourselves where you would be sure to notice us. Carter's image gestured, and tactical displays appeared around the chamber. Each one showed a human ship in what should have been impossible locations. The UNS Defiance is currently in orbit around your homeworld. The UNS Retribution is positioned inside the Kronak defensive perimeter. The UNS Vindication is holding station near the Vailtar research facility. 47 other ships are in similar positions throughout your territory. General Vorthak's voice boomed across the chamber. "This is an act of war." "No," Carter replied. "This is a demonstration. An act of war would have involved us shooting first." Her image turned to look directly at Zelthara. "Council Prime, you have spent thousands of years believing that you control this galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. Today, you learned that you were wrong." "Impossible," whispered Trade Minister Xylos. "Our sensors would have detected any approaching ships." Dr. Thompson's image appeared beside Carter's. "Only if we wanted you to detect them. Counselors, you've been studying our technology for 3 years and you still don't understand what you're looking at. Our quantum drives don't just move through space differently than yours. They move through space-time itself." She gestured, and a technical display appeared. "While your ships lumber through predictable jump points and wormhole networks, our vessels can appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. You cannot track us. You cannot predict where we will be, and you cannot stop us." The implications hit the Council members like physical blows. Their entire defensive strategy was based on controlling access points and monitoring ship movements. If humans could bypass those systems entirely, then no Council world was truly safe. "What do you want?" Zelthara asked quietly. Carter's image smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We want you to remember this moment. Council Prime. We want you to remember that there are species in this galaxy that you cannot intimidate, cannot control, and cannot defeat." "You're threatening us," accused General Vorthak. "We're educating you," Carter replied. "For the first time in 1,000 years, you're learning what it feels like to be vulnerable." "How does it suit you?" Jake Morrison stepped forward. "Council Prime, my government wants you to know that every human ship currently in your space is armed and ready for combat. But we haven't fired a single shot. We haven't targeted a single civilian installation. We haven't even locked weapons onto your military vessels." He paused, letting that sink in. This is humanity showing restraint. This is us choosing not to hurt you even though we could. The question you need to ask yourselves is this: do you want to find out what humanity looks like when we stop being restrained? The chamber erupted in voices again, but Jake could see that the tone had changed. Fear was replacing anger. Uncertainty was replacing confidence. Council Prime Zelthara raised a crystalline appendage for silence. When the chamber quieted, her voice was different than before. Less commanding, more careful. Ambassador Morrison, what does humanity propose? Jake smiled. That's better, Council Prime, much better. 3 weeks later, the council chamber looked very different. The towering platforms where alien representatives once looked down on lesser species had been lowered. The single chair in the center, where ambassadors once stood alone to plead their cases, had been replaced with a circular table. Even the lighting had changed, casting fewer shadows and creating a more equal atmosphere. Jake Morrison sat at that table now, no longer standing as a supplicant, but sitting as an equal among equals. Around him sat representatives from 17 different species, including several that had never been allowed to address the council before. Council Prime Zelthara's crystalline form had lost much of its former brilliance. When she spoke, her voice no longer carried the absolute authority it once had. Ambassador Morrison, the preliminary treaty documents have been reviewed by all parties. However, several points remain concerning. Jake looked up from his tablet. Across the table, Captain Ryan Walsh represented humanity's military interests, while Dr. Alex Thompson spoke for the scientific community. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted so dramatically that humans were now being asked to help establish the new order. Which points specifically, Council Prime? The territorial provisions, said what remained of General Vorthak's command staff. The general himself was still recovering from what human medics politely called stress-related crystallization disorder. Apparently, being completely outmaneuvered in warfare had physical effects on Chronac physiology. Jake nodded. You mean the parts where we establish that no species can claim authority over another species, expansion into unclaimed space. The galaxy has always had territorial boundaries, protested Trade Minister Zelos. Without proper regulation, conflicts are inevitable. Dr. Thompson leaned forward. Minister, with respect, the old system of regulation involved the council deciding which species deserved which territories based on your personal preferences. That's not regulation. That's favoritism backed by military force. A new voice spoke up from the far side of the table. Ambassador Keth of the Solon Republic was one of 7 species that had declared independence from council authority in the weeks following humanity's demonstration of power. The Solons had been restricted to 3 star systems for over 2 centuries, despite having the technology and population to colonize dozens more. Dr. Thompson is correct, Keth said in accented but clear English. The Council's territorial regulations served only to maintain the status quo. Species that supported Council policies received expansion rights. Those that questioned Council decisions were restricted to their home systems. Zelthara's form pulsed with defensive colors. The Council maintained stability for thousands of years. The Council maintained control for thousands of years, Jake corrected. There's a difference. Stability built on oppression isn't really stability at all. It's just delayed revolution. Captain Walsh, who had been quietly reviewing military reports, looked up. Speaking of revolution, we've received formal independence declarations from 4 more species this week. The Hegemony Trade Union has dissolved, and the Veiltar have withdrawn from galactic affairs entirely. The changes had been swift and dramatic. Once humanity proved that the Council could be challenged successfully, other species found the courage to question their own situations. Some chose independence. Others negotiated for better terms within a reformed council structure. A few, like the mysterious Veiltar, simply vanished from galactic politics altogether. President Carter appeared on the chamber's main display, joining the session from Earth's new orbital defense station. The station was one of 12 that had been built openly in recent weeks. A clear message that humanity was no longer hiding its military capabilities. Council members, independent representatives, I want to address the elephant in the room, she began. Everyone here is wondering the same thing. What happens now? Does humanity plan to become the new galactic overlord? The question hung in the air. It was the fear that kept many species from supporting the new order. Had they simply traded one master for another? The answer is no, Carter continued. Humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy. We never wanted to fight the Council. We just wanted the right to live as we chose. Then why maintain such a large military presence? Asked Representative Thyler of the Centauri Alliance. Admiral Rodriguez appeared beside Carter on the display. Representative Thyler, humanity maintains a large military for the same reason we declared independence in the first place. To ensure that no one can force us to live according to their rules rather than our own. But your fleets could conquer half the galaxy? Thyler pressed. Yes, they could, Rodriguez agreed. But conquest was never the goal. The goal was freedom, our freedom, and the freedom of any other species that wants it. Jake stood and activated a holographic display. Ladies, gentlemen, and other beings, let me show you what the new galactic order looks like. The display showed a map of local space divided into different colored zones. Blue areas represent independent territories. Each species controls its own expansion, its own trade, and its own internal affairs. Green areas represent the Reformed Council, species that have chosen to remain in a mutual defense and trade alliance, but with equal representation rather than the old hierarchical system. And the red areas? Asked Keth. Red areas are neutral zones. No species can claim them without approval from all neighboring territories. They're available for joint colonization projects, research stations, or whatever other cooperative ventures people can imagine. Dr. Thompson gestured, and the display zoomed in on several systems. We've already identified 16 systems suitable for joint research facilities. Imagine what we could accomplish if the galaxy's best scientists worked together instead of in isolation. The idea was revolutionary. For millennia, advanced research had been controlled by the Council and shared only with favored species. The prospect of open scientific collaboration was both exciting and terrifying to civilizations that had hoarded knowledge for centuries. Council Prime Zelthara's form brightened slightly. Ambassador Morrison, these proposals are ambitious, but they assume that species will choose cooperation over competition. Council Prime, Jake replied. Humanity has learned something important over the past few weeks. Competition makes you stronger when you're competing with equals. But when competition becomes domination, everyone gets weaker. The dominant species stops innovating because they don't have to. The dominated species can't innovate because they're not allowed to. He gestured to the assembled representatives. Look around this room. 3 weeks ago, half these species weren't allowed to speak in council chambers. Now they're helping to design a new galactic government. Which version of the galaxy do you think is more likely to create new technologies, explore new frontiers, and solve old problems? The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The old system had collapsed the moment humanity proved it could be challenged. The only question was what would replace it. When the final votes were counted, the results were overwhelming. 43 species approved the new territorial agreements. 38 voted for the reformed council structure. And 51 species, including several that had never been allowed council membership before, signed the Galactic Independence Accords. As the session ended, Jake found himself standing at the chamber's great window looking out at the stars. Captain Walsh joined him, both men quiet after the long day. Think it'll work? Walsh asked. The new system? Maybe. Probably not the way we designed it, but something like it. Jake smiled. You know what I think the real victory is, Ryan? What's that? 3 weeks ago, the most powerful beings in the galaxy thought they could order humanity around like children. Today, they're asking us to help them figure out how to govern themselves without oppression. Walsh nodded. Not bad for a species that supposedly learned to fly between stars just a few decades ago. Behind them, representatives from dozens of species worked together on documents that would reshape galactic civilization. Some of the partnerships would fail. Some of the new territories would face conflicts. Some species would discover that freedom was harder than submission, but for the first time in millennia, they would face those challenges by choice rather than by command. Jake checked his watch. In 6 hours, he would board a transport back to Earth. His job as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council was officially over, since there was no longer a Galactic Council in the old sense. His new job as humanity's representative to the reformed Galactic Alliance would begin next month. The stars looked the same as they always had, but somehow the view was completely different. On Earth, President Carter stood in the Oval Office reviewing the final treaty documents. Outside her window, she could see construction crews working on the new interstellar communications array that would connect Earth to the growing network of free worlds. Her aide knocked on the door. "Madam President, there's one more item for your signature. The formal declaration ending the state of emergency." Carter signed the document with a simple pen, the same type humans had been using for centuries. With